Hi, this is Dale Corpus. It's November 2017, and I'm bringing you episode number 9 of the Sold by Dale show. So I'm excited about today's guest because she's an amazing realtor colleague of mine, based in Carmel Valley, and she's a top-notch agent. So I wanted to bring her on because she helps people invest in different real estate types, not just residential properties. She guides clients with commercial and multi-unit property investments, which offer appealing benefits to investors versus just solely focusing on residential single-family units like detached homes and condos. So without further ado, we have Kathleen Hendricks from Teles Properties on this episode. Hey, Kathleen, thanks for joining me on my show this month. It's so great to have you.
Thank you, Dale. I'm excited to be here.
Well, hey, so we're on the topic of investing in multifamily units. And so what I wanted to ask you, what's the big draw to investing in multifamily versus, let's say, single family homes?
I think the big draw is that there's economies of scale. You've got more units bringing in money, and so the pot of money is larger and your rate of return is better oftentimes on multifamily than on a single family. And the other big thing is that there's risk mitigation. If you've got a single family and it happens to be vacant for a month, there's no income coming in during that month. If you've got a 4-unit complex, then you've got money coming in, say, on 3 units and not 1. But you've still got 75% of the money rolling in. Yeah.
So versus if it was a single family home, it's either 100% rented or 100% vacant. So having something like a triplex or a fourplex helps balance that, balance out the risk, right? Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. It helps keep the cash flow coming in, especially if you've got a payment on the property. It helps keep that payment covered as opposed to having to find the money somewhere else.
And for folks that, I didn't even define what multi-unit meant. Can you, in your words, what does multi-unit even mean?
So multi-unit is actually anything more than 2 units. If you look on MLS and the definition there, so it could be 2 to thousands. However, there's another definition that when you're looking at getting financing, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loans will consider 1 to 4 units residential, and so you can get conventional financing on anything 1 to 4. If you go over 4 or 5 and up, you're looking at other types of loans, either private, transferring cash from one asset to another, to this multifamily. Sometimes there's seller financing involved, and so it's a really different it's a different financial situation, and it's more complex when you get into 5 units and more.
So from what you're saying is that if it was 4 units or less, financing is more readily available and easier for someone to qualify for versus something that's 5 units and up. Is that correct?
That's correct. 4 units and under is conventional, so it'd be similar to buying a single family home.
Okay, got you. And so when you're dealing with investors that are interested in multi-unit properties, are you seeing them jump in initially first in those smaller units, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes?
Most investors, first-time investors do. You know, it's funny. I think some of us are actually investors and we don't realize it. Maybe we bought a condo, when our first property, and now we rent it out. So technically, you're an investor. But for those looking to go into, more multi-unit, or they may even be looking at other types of assets like a strip center, an office complex, a medical office. There's lots of types of investment assets that are still real estate, but not necessarily multifamily. But anyway, back to your question. They do often go into 5 units or less. It's financially more comfortable for a lot of people to go into something that's, say, $1 million or under, or just around a little over $1 million, rather than jumping into, say, a 20 or 30 unit apartment complex that might be multi-millions.
Okay, that makes sense. And when when you're working with investors, let's say for the first time, how do you guide them through the process of just finding an investment property?
What I do initially is we have a conversation, and that conversation needs to, we need to discuss what they're trying to achieve, what their comfort level is, what their risk tolerance is. That's a big factor. What their expectations are for this investment, and we kind of work through all those things. We talk about different kinds of investment properties, as I mentioned, apartments, offices, strip centers, medical offices. There's self-storage. There's all kinds of different properties that one can look at, and then we look at whether are they looking for rate of return, cash flow? Are they looking for asset appreciation? There's a lot of different factors that are involved. So after we have that conversation, then we start narrowing it down and actually looking at properties that fit that criteria.
A lot of times, at least in my what I thought is, aren't a lot of times people looking for cash flow in these types of properties?
A lot of people are, but honestly, right now, what I'm experiencing is I'm working with several clients who are not comfortable with having so much money in the stock market. And so what they're looking to do is transfer some of those assets out of stocks and bonds and other financial products into real estate. So they may not be looking for as much cash flow as they are for security. And they're looking in markets, at least down in this area where I'm at, appreciation. So they're looking for the appreciation in that. But yes, there are clients that are looking purely for cash flow, and that's something that we have to, consider, given that our market's really tight here in the investment arena as well as single family. So we have to look at products that might work for them.
And on a related note, when you're working with a first-time multi-unit investor, just based on the experience that you've had with past clients, have you seen any employ any special strategies in buying their first multi-unit?
Yeah, there's some really clever strategies out there that I've seen clients use, and I belong to several associations, and we help people try and be clever and creative. And so one of I think the easiest ones is what we call house hacking, and that is where you actually live in the property and rent out. Either if you buy a duplex, you live in one and you rent out the other. There's even people who buy a home that maybe has a separate entrance, so they portion off that part and they rent it as a separate unit. And so what they're doing is they're building wealth. They're helping to supplement their offset their payments, and that helps them on their trajectory towards being, buying other investments in the future, maybe moving out of that and turning that asset into just an investment property at some point down the road. But it's a great strategy to use, and it can really accelerate things for you.
It sounds really creative. One last question for you is, how do you know when something is a good deal for a client?
Great question. So there are some key metrics that we use when looking at investment property. And we look at cash on cash return. We also look at cap rate. And those are some calculations we do based on how the property is producing its income, operating income, and what the property is selling for. So we do this calculation to determine. The cap rate is like a rate of return that you would have, say, in a stock market.
Or even a bank account, even.
So right now, cap rates of return are lower than they have been historically, and that similarly in the stock market. And then the cash on cash return is it's a way of looking at, are you getting anything out of the cash you're putting in? And we always want to see a positive number there, unless there's some extenuating circumstance. So those are the two numbers that are, very simplistically, those are two numbers that we look at initially.
Okay, that makes sense. I know that there's a lot of information that comes into play when we're talking about investing in multi-unit, and I know we don't have enough time to cover everything. But what I'm going to do is this: at least open up my audience or whoever's watching this video to be able to reach out to you for further questions. So, if you could, can you please just shout out and say what your contact information is?
Sure. Kathleen Hendricks, and my website is kathleenhendricks.com. My email is kathleen@kathleenhendricks.com. If you want to just give me a call or a text, is 831-917-0839. And I love to talk about investing in real estate, so give me a shout.
Perfect. Well, Kathleen, thanks again for being on the show. So you guys could reach out to Kathleen if you have any specific scenario questions or anything related to anything she mentioned in this video. And I'll see everybody next month.
Thanks, Dale.
Okay, bye.
Bye.